So, I have the privilege of giving a reading tonight as we go down the line of the community, and I thought that at this point in the retreat that we've been in retreat for a while practicing, and it's kind of cold and dark, and maybe our minds are cold and dark, and so I thought I would give a teaching from Bloom, which is Ajahn Sona's Buddhist Reflections on Serenity and Love. So hopefully this will warm up our minds, our spirits, and just feel free to let it permeate and saturate and brighten your practice. The talk I'd like to read is called Knocking from the Inside. Tonight we recited the Metta Sutta, the Loving Kindness Sutta, which is a core teaching of the Buddha. Despite the fact that lots of people teach about metta, I don't think it's emphasized enough as a substantial practice in itself. It's often kind of treated as something you do on the side before you get on with the serious business of reflection, insight. But as you can see, this sutta works through a series of developments. The beginning talks about character development, and then it defines what goodwill is, extending to all beings, spending quite a bit of time going through categories of beings which are to be included in your profound goodwill. It ends with one who transcends the senses and does not return to this world. In the classical teachings of the Buddha, he talks about his monks and nuns dwelling in loving kindness night and day, some for their whole lives. The Buddha speaks in praise of that. There is no downside to it. In itself, friendliness is not the liberation, but it is the springboard. It naturally leads right to the edge of understanding. The Buddha emphasizes that if you are established in virtue, there is no need to wish, "May my mind be lucid and clear." For one established in virtue, lucidity, clarity, samadhi naturally arises. One established in samadhi has no need to wish, "May I gain insight." Insight naturally arises and swells out of samadhi. I would say that insight perhaps doesn't arise naturally and swell out of samadhi if you have no familiarity with the basic three characteristics that the Buddha teaches again and again, anicca, dukkha, anatta. But it is very easy to hear that in 5 minutes. You can basically get a sketch of the essence of Buddhism, and, in fact, if you associate with Buddhist groups, you will hear it repeated endlessly. It should be in your conscious mind and work its way into your subconscious, unconscious mind. So it will be there, but it does need its support. It doesn't operate independently. The Buddha is deeply advocating the cultivation of the sublime abidings, the Brahma Viharas. There is nothing to be concerned about or afraid of. You won't get stuck with them. This is the type of talk you'll hear as well. Don't get attached. I find myself saying regularly over the last 8 or 10 years, you're already attached. There's no question of you not being attached. That is the primary condition. If you weren't attached, you wouldn't need to hear the teachings of the Buddha. You are attached, and you will be attached to good things. But through the stages of enlightenment, even the good things fade out in a very beautiful way. First of all, the moment you get a little glimpse, it's irreversible, and you're heading for home. There's no going back. Who would want to, anyway? The path only goes in one direction. Sometimes there are little delays and impediments along the way which make it longer or shorter, but the inevitability of finishing is certain. In fact, when the beginning of the path arises, the end of the path arises. They are separated only by time, but they are connected and inevitable. It is a little bit like modern physics, where particles are somehow in communication with each other at a distance and cannot be separated. You hear a bit of this language sometimes about the path and the fruit. You'll hear this curious discussion of the path moment and the fruition moment, and how they arise one moment apart. There's a little bit of debate sometimes between the suttas and the Abhidhamma about whether your entrance into the path and the results of the path could be separated by time, or whether they are right next to each other. What we can say for sure is that they basically do arise simultaneously, but could be separated by time. This just means that once you start down a road which has no other turn-offs, your destination is assured. Before that time, for instance, in the suburbs, especially in Surrey outside of Vancouver, you can wander endlessly, 138A Street, 138B, and so forth, and 138B South, 138C North. You can get lost in there. But once you get into one of the cul-de-sacs that has no turn-offs, then you're assured of finding your friend's house where you're going to dinner. They'll usually tell you, once you hit that sign, you can't miss our house. That is quite heartening because in the earliest stages you don't have to have all that much sophistication to get to the earliest glimpse. Yet from that point, there's no doubt where you're going. That's supported by some beautiful things before the first glimpse takes place. The Buddha is saying it's not just at enlightenment that good things happen. Before that, long before that, there are mundane beautiful states and you will be attached to them. This condition of loving kindness, profound goodwill, is addictive. You want to live in it. You never want to come out of it. By the way, that's one of the ways to know of its loving kindness. You easily get attached to it. So be on the lookout for attachment, but not fearful of attachment. These are fortunate attachments. One fortunate attachment is meditative cultivation, and one of the most central cultivations is this emotional cultivation of the heart. Now, when you talk like this, Buddhism starts to make sense to ordinary people. Ordinary people may be kind of interested in Buddhism, since it has a good reputation, but quite often when you talk about anicca, dukkha, and anatta, the endless round of rebirth, all the suffering, etc., they don't find it very palatable. Those who are eager explorers will read some of the texts and have an instant grasp that it's all about detachment. So they usually have an appreciation of emotional development, of loving kindness. If you read and go onto blogs and threads on Buddhist sites, you will see this. Quite often people will be purists, or think that they have the right view. It's fascinating to see, all over the world, people who are in their 20s discovering Buddhism in the middle of Manitoba or Minnesota. They are finding their way through the forest of views on the web. Just as the Buddha had to find his way through the forest of views in 5th century BC India. When you actually look at the suttas, you will see this praise of the divine abidings. They can function as platforms in themselves, platforms which lead inevitably to realization, to the liberation that is your ultimate goal. They might be especially conducive to leading you in the direction of the basic insights, so it should never be thought that it is a beginner's practice or some kind of warm-up. It is a full practice. In the various commentaries and the suttas, you will find high placement of this loving kindness. Samsara is often described as the wandering on. The experience of life is like that. It's hard to find your home. If you're not sophisticated, you attempt to build a home. Every human has the instincts. Even the animals, of course, have the nesting instincts, the shelter instinct. They look for some place, some refuge. Humans have it as well. They take refuge in places. Sometimes they're nomadic, but the refuge there is your fellow nomads. You take refuge and you keep moving. You carry your home with you as long as you're with that group. But of course, all these things are so subject to the pressures of change, and so it is the human experience to sometimes be left homeless. Even when you seem to have a stable home, there's always anxiety and uncertainty in the background that you could lose it. You keep buying more insurance policies, but you can never shut down that voice that it's all built on sand. This is the uncertainty of samsara, the wandering on, the futile attempt to find a home where there is no home. In fact, the monks and the nuns are called samanas. When they first enter and start the training, they are called anagarikas, an interesting term meaning the one without a home. So we go forth into homelessness. How can we go forth into homelessness if there is no home to begin with? What we're doing is just becoming a symbol of reality. No one has a home. Everybody is homeless. Are monks more homeless than everybody else? No. Sometimes monks in the time of the Buddha would find a good cave and stay there the rest of their life. And it would be the villagers who were swept away by floods and have to rebuild. Who's homeless and who's not homeless? Everybody is homeless, but the monks are trying to bring it into consciousness. So daily they wear symbols, these robes, and they have bowls and so forth. These are symbols for the benefit of the monks to remind themselves with their daily recollections. You're homeless. You can't find a home, don't even try. This also helps others who may be under the illusion that they have a home. You remember the Buddha, or the Bodhisattva, being impressed by the sight of the samana. Some wander heading off into the forest as one of the 4 signs: old age, sickness, death, and a samana. These signs are all around us, and yet people are unconscious. This is always dangerous, to be living in an unconscious conceit. Not conceit in the sense that your ego is huge, but conceit about the stability of your possessions and your home, etc. The Buddha is there to say we need constant reminders, not just ideas or books, but monks living that way to constantly allow that symbol to be visible. I sometimes try to understand how things are going for organized religions in the West, especially contemplative religions. I try to look at how things are going for the Catholic Church in the West. One of the things that has happened in my lifetime is that the nuns have stopped wearing their habits. You don't see nuns out there anymore. You probably do, but you don't recognize them since they aren't wearing any special garb. They don't wear the black and the whites, and so you don't see them. That's too bad, because they are supposed to be living reminders. In the Buddhist tradition, we haven't given up the robes. We wear these in public and in the monasteries. It's functioning as a teaching device. It should strike one as a reminder that this is not a place where you live, this is a passage. Life is a passage, a train station, or something like that. At the same time, I think you'll probably find that monks, if they've been monks long enough and meditating, or lay people who have been meditating and digging deeper into reality, start to become comfortable, kind of at home wherever they go. Anxiety declines because they know that home is not in some particular place, but is found in letting go of attachments and fears. This is the quality of loving kindness as well. Loving kindness has a quality of home. It's something you can take with you everywhere that you abide in. That's why it's called a Brahmavihara, the home of the gods. A much more stable, reliable, and beautiful home. The line that always comes to me from Robert Frost is that question about home. He said, home is the place where, when you have to go there, they have to take you in. That's home. He put his finger on it, didn't he? You know, things may not go so well and you have your flaws, but when you think of home, it's the place where they say, yeah, we know who you are. Come in, come in. There's the bedroom for you. But does everyone have a place like that? We should have a house with our relatives that have to take you. But in the real world, sometimes they die or whatever and they're not there. So, it sounds like a good idea to me to have a place where when you gotta go there, they gotta take you. That is metta. That is the Brahma-vihara, the divine abiding, the place which is even better than your parents' house. It's the emotional place where, when you gotta go there, it has to take you. You have to work on that yourself. You have to provide unconditioned acceptance, a warm and welcoming and beautiful embrace of yourself. The doors are always open to you there. You're in the position of being both the one who has to take you and the one who has to knock on the door. Perhaps that's what Jesus was talking about. Knock and the door shall be opened. Whose door are you knocking on? Yours. I think there's a Rumi poem, he's always funny. I have lived on the lip of insanity, wanting to know reasons, knocking on the door. It opens. I've been knocking from the inside. That's loving kindness. What? You're not going to accept yourself? How could you not accept yourself? So it's the full embrace with all the warts and the dandruff. That's what the loving kindness sutta goes through. If you're big, if you're small, if you're fat or far away, magnificent or ugly, it has no bearing on it at all. You're welcome. I have to take you. The Buddha has realized this. If any being knocks, they get shelter there. He has to take them. Is that an imposition? Is that a problem? Is it dangerous? No. That's the other characteristic of loving kindness. It's safe. The more open your door is, the safer it is. When it's locked, it's dangerous. When it's locked, you can't get out either. When there's a fire, you can't get out. When your door is locked, there's a fire. There's the fear of fire and anxiety and worries and everything, and the door is locked. You're locked in. So it's only by opening the door and dropping the judgments towards oneself and others, that you are safe. The divine emotion is operative without any qualifications. Fortunately, it really is. One does not have to go through a checklist about oneself before one generates this feeling. The Buddhists suggest that you go through various categories. Sometimes they talk about all the beings to the north, the south, the various directions, large, middling, to be born, etc. All this is saying is that there are no barriers, no boundaries, no qualifications whatsoever. You don't have to ask yourself how worthy you are at all. You're in. You just show up, knock, you're in. It's a very weird thing. This is not the way the world usually works. You usually have to get all these qualifications. When you want to go someplace, to another country, they want your visa, they want this and that. You want to go to a school, they want this and that. You have to qualify for everything. Even if you want to go out on a date, you have to tell them how tall you are. So this is a very strange experience. Metta is no qualifications necessary. You are fully accepted. Metta doesn't want to know the details, doesn't want to know your past or your future. Of course, everybody's favorite monk is Angulimala. He's a serial murderer who became an arahant and slept like a baby. Never had a bad dream. He's the one you could never top. How is that possible? That's not right. Surely God would strike him down somehow. But not in Buddhism. He's a great character. It shows you that the way you think it operates, it doesn't. There is this kama stuff, you have to be very careful about what you do, but it's not about forgiveness. because there's nobody to forgive you. It's just the ceasing of unskillful operations in the mind. There are unskillful operations which cease, and then you're home. And when they cease, the past, the operation of the past, and its voice disturbing you, judging you, creating a story, a life, a person, a character, is gone. That's a curious thing. It's like a magic trick. Where did it go? Where did I go? It's just that the Buddha is a great psychologist. Don't even ask, he says. It's the wrong question. If you're asking, you don't get it. It's just a process. Nothing happened. Nobody went anywhere. But we feel better. Not just better, best. You wonder if you're allowed to feel that good. Do you deserve it? Is this what humans should be doing? Shouldn't you be toiling or suffering or something? The Buddha seems to be violating a lot of rules. He's just saying, get on with it. Enjoy yourself. Profoundly. There are a lot of stories about the difficulty of the path, how much work the spiritual discipline is. But there are also lots of stories about people who hardly had a moment of difficulty, and they just lived blissfully ever after. This is heartily endorsed by the Buddha, highly recommended. He doesn't want anybody to struggle. He's just saying that you might have to struggle, to stop struggling. You might have to do a few things in order to relieve your distress. You can never recall too many times this beautiful invitation. If you spend the whole retreat just doing this, that would be fine. You could spend the next week, the next month, the next year, or the rest of your life just enjoying your home in heaven in the Brahma Viharas. Spend the rest of your life dwelling in a different dimension, not being so interested in that outer play of light which this world is. This world is just thick light. When you see it with your eyes. All you see is light, various types of light, dark and bright, and green and blue and yellow. That's all. That's the world. It goes on, it plays in the background, but you don't live there. You live in a feeling. The Buddha is recommending that you live in an emotion. Don't try to live out in the world. You can't enter. It's an illusion of the mind. Somehow, the brain is a three-dimensional construction, and it looks like it's out there, but of course it's inside. It's in your mind. Your mind is taking data and reconstructing it, a three-dimensional construction which you can never get. It's a play of consciousness. But you can enter into a feeling. You can dwell in a feeling. In fact, you must. One of the things you can't avoid is feeling. It's just a matter of which one. There's also sometimes a misunderstanding on a lot of people's part. You have to be careful because you could get attached to pleasant feelings. That's more maybe to do with pizza or something. Don't get confused between pizza and the dwelling of the gods. Although that would be a good pizza parlor name. Dwelling of the gods. It's not the same. It should be clear, but apparently it's not clear. You should be a little suspicious of getting carried away with pleasant tastes and sights. Not that they are all suddenly cardboard in your mouth or something like that. You are just aware of what they are. It's a pleasant sensation. It won't last. You're not trying to throw a wet blanket on anything, just knowing what it is. But these sublime spiritual emotions are in a different category. Again and again you must reflect on the transience of all things. It shouldn't interfere in any way with the divinity of that emotion. You should remain feeling safe because you're in this. That's why loving kindness is a protection, because you feel safe. You cannot have the feeling of loving kindness, friendliness, without also the cessation of fear and anxiety, worry, and also the dries. You can't be bored, in despair, or any of those kinds of emotions and be dwelling in the divine emotions. You can't. They are mutually exclusive. So you're protected from these dreadful emotions. Those emotions are worlds. When the Buddha talks about worlds, he really means emotions. Realms of existence are emotional dimensions. None of them exist without emotional structure. They are real and have weight to them because of the feelings that are associated with them. There aren't any worlds apart from feelings. This is something to reflect on. It's very close. Dhamma sometimes can seem a long ways away. It can seem abstract and complicated, but loving kindness is something you felt perhaps even when you were a baby or a very young child. It wasn't complicated. The Buddha is saying that you touch the divine there. Maybe as a child it was just fortunate circumstances, but childhood is over and you have to make fortunate circumstances. Not create a world around you, but create a world within you where you experience this. Create this as a mother loves and protects her child, her only child. You're not looking for a mother. You're becoming like that mother, towards yourself and towards others. That's the exercise, to learn to create. It's an invitation to art, isn't it? To making your life a work of art, of grace and beauty and love. This is the invitation of the Buddha. No wonder he was famous. We wouldn't remember him if he didn't talk like that. I think when people were around him, they believed it too. He just had the absolute authenticity in his voice. He had the metta. You were welcome there. Of course, anybody who came to visit him was welcome. So, reflect like this and steep in the emotion. Not just a few drops of it wetting your hair or something like that. You have to drench yourself in it. Soak yourself in it. You won't become dysfunctional. You will still be able to walk and talk and eat. The Buddha could. All of the ones who are famous for their loving kindness were perfectly able to conduct themselves in a skillful, appropriate way. There is no contradiction between the sublime emotions and the practical conduct of life. That's what I had to read for this evening. I've always found it very powerful. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Ajahn Sona?
That was beautiful. Thank you, Obhasi. I really resonate with the story. It reminds me of the same, along the same lines of Longpor Samedo. Ajahn Gai read his story about unconditional love. And it seems like they're both talking about the same thing, as when you reach that point in your practice, it feels like you obtain this equanimity, this contentment, and so you just automatically have metta for all beings, all people. And I also resonated with how he said that you leave home, but you're going to another home. And I have that same feeling, like living in RV, selling my home, and people say, wow, I could never do that, That's so scary. But, and I was like, no, it's kind of nice to let that go. Like he was saying about, you always have to worry about your house, insurance, floods, like losing your job, can't pay your mortgage. Like, it's not secure at all. And to leave that behind and kind of throwing yourself into the world and practicing and then feeling this other kind of security. And I feel like, a house is still like, it's still in the changing conditions, but that kind of love is almost like you're reaching samadhi, which is unconditional, and it's something that you can hold on to. Does that make sense? Thank you.